We've got Matt Arends here from Spring Lake Farm. He's a biodynamic, I'm interested in what that means, regenerative market garden producing organically grown vegetables, herbs, and flowers.
Wow.
I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, I bet you are.
Yes, I am.
I'm excited to talk about something.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sure you are. Sheila, as people who know Sheila,
Matt doesn't know me yet.
when she pulls into the driveway, she's in the garage.
In my pink car.
In her pink car. She's in the garage.
With eyelashes.
The door of the car hasn't even closed yet. And she's talking. She's talking.
I'm talking on the phone.
She's already in full throttle as she walks.
For this.
Yes, as she walks through the back door. And same thing in the morning. She gets up in the morning. She's walking down the hall. She's starting to talk as soon as she leaves the bedroom, and it never ends until 10 p.m.
So, I want to share a couple of testimonials.
All right,
okay?
super.
And Matt and I were talking off air before we started about how people just assume when you get to a certain age or whatnot that pain is just part of life, and it really isn't. I'm 58. 58's great, and I mean I feel better than I did in my 30s, and senior's going to be 69, and you mean you don't have a pain? We're not on any medications. Like it's just not our thing, right? And it doesn't have to be your thing. And I just want you to know that. And you know, we all started somewhere, and unfortunately, Matt, it's like a lot of us. For me, it took me to hit my rock bottom and to be ill and the liver functioning 35%, and I'm going down the tubes, and I needed to make a choice, right? I have to make the choice of change everything that I do, or I don't even know if I'd be here eight years later. Matt, I was also hospitalized for aspartame poisoning from Diet Pop, so it is a real thing. And so I do love helping people, right? Because we always say we love selling homes and keeping people healthy in them. But recently we've that's so broad that people really don't is it just on deaf ears, right? So how about I love selling homes and helping you feel better, because everybody could feel better, right? So how about that? We're going to try to take...
I don't think I could.
Feel better?
I feel amazing all the time.
Well, you I don't know if he's lying or if he just says it all the time.
He's got a big smile on his
but,
face.
But I believe that, right? And there's so much of it truth to your mental, thought process and how you look at it as well. So, a couple of testimonials. I just want to give out a couple of shouts out.
Okay.
So, like I said, we have a ton of modalities. We have a ton of resources. Like I can help you in, let's just have a conversation first, and then we'll see where we take you.
Okay.
One of the our past clients, actually a real estate past client, was dealing with some stuff, and the first thing that really we thought to get under control, my girlfriend and I, my go-to person, was how about let's start with the blood sugars. Let's just try to get those down there first. And so we helped her get her blood sugars down 100 points in a month and a half. Okay. So that's one of those things that makes me feel good, but obviously makes her feel good. But it's just one of those things where, wow, it feels really good. And I know that, she's on the right track. Right. So we have this, Itovi scan. So it's this little handheld device. You hold it, reads your meridian points, and it tells you some indications of what's going on. What could your body use support with today? Why are you smirking like that?
Nothing.
Okay, well, it usually means something when you're doing that. And so he's giving me the smirk over here. And so everything that came up on this gal was brain support. And I was like, ooh, I've never seen that before. Like I don't know what that means, right? And so it lists top 10 Young Living products, and it was brain support and whatnot. And I said, so why do you think...
What's up with the brain?
Yeah, why do you think... Do you know why all this came up? And she said, well, sure, I have chemo brain. And I said, okay, I've heard that term. I don't really know what that means. And she said, well, I had chemo and for my breast cancer, and it's been a few years, and she has brain fog, low energy, can't remember where the keys are, just all these things. And I said, okay, well, from what I know about our products, let's try these two things. right? So we have a brain cognitive function supplement and then our beloved Niksha. So I said, let's just try it. Let's just try those two things
See what
for
happens.
3 months. Anything natural, it takes time, right? It's not a magic pill. And so in 3 weeks, she called me and she said, "Oh my gosh, I feel so much better already." And so it's those kind of stories, and that's what I love about it is I love giving and helping people feel better and obviously having them have results with it.
Right.
And it's all an education process. You have to be ready, right? You have to be ready to want to do something. And if you're at that point, man, I am your go-to person and I am here to help you. When you go to the website, ourhealthyhomes.com, the 3 main tabs, obviously, if you want to see houses, there's a shop for houses tab on there. And then the events tab, which when you go to the events tab, it has everything listed. That's a Zoom, in person. And then the classes tab is something that I'd encourage you listeners to just go mess around with and go on one of the classes. And all the classes, it's a specific topic, right? So oils for babies, or aging gracefully, or CBD, or whatever it is.
Self-directed.
Yep, just click on the tab, and it's nice pictures and words, and just get an idea of what that looks like, and then whatever topic it is that you're interested in, however you're feeling, reach out to me.
I will put a warning on that, though. You can get so sucked into that.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're watching one of these things and they are very well done, for
Yep.
one thing. Well done. And they're so doggone interesting.
Yeah.
That it's just like, oh. Then you watch another one. Oh. Then you watch another. Pretty soon you're binging on them.
Yeah,
And
right.
there's like
there's
50 of them.
Right, there's like 40 of them. But ourhealthyhomes.com, just go mess around on the website. Again, we have the in-person events and we have the virtual events. And I love to talk about the Monday Night Ignites, because the Monday Night Ignites are like Young Living, the world Young Living, right? So it's a lot of doctors that are Young Living,
Advocates.
people, right? And so it's good education, and it's a Zoom, and those are designated times, so I can't change those. But go on there. We're having an event the end of August. I always like to say it's healthy home approved perfume, because there's so many toxins in your perfume, your cologne, your whatever. If anything has the word fragrance on it, we need to have a conversation. If it's got sodium lauryl sulfate, phthalates, like paraben, like the list just goes on, and how that affects your body, and over time it does add up, right? So we love the perfume one, because doesn't everybody wear perfume or cologne, guys? There's some things out there for you. So that's one of the next in-person ones, but we do have a lot of Zooms. We still do our monthly samples. So if you go on there and you want your samples for the month and join us on a Zoom, we'll talk about the benefits of those products of the month, and just whatever it is that you need. I like to service you that way.
All right. We're going to go out to break early. So Matt Arends is here. Keep his forehead from hitting the table here. Matt Arends is here. So we always like to say it's Young Living or Assisted Living.
Right.
Broadcasting from the legendary Rack Shack Barbecue
Yes.
studio, the #1 health food in America.
Okay.
Rack Shack Barbecue, so good.
Matt's going to tell us.
Call 651-775-9194. Talk to the lovely and talented Sheila and get the best advice of your life on all your health and wellness needs. If she can't answer your questions, she'll steer you in the right direction. I'm kind of excited about this. We're talking with Matt Arends, and we are talking about
Kind of.
Spring Lake. Yeah, I'm just kind of excited. I'm not really excited.
We'll get
just
you really
kinda.
excited by the end.
Okay, so Matt, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, because we are an organic house, right? So everything is natural, everything is organic, all of that
No
stuff.
chemicals.
And we are also small business owners, small business people, and I know how challenging it is. We were just having a conversation this morning with our son and son-in-law, and because the Rack Shack Barbecue is a small business, and it's just so doggone hard to make it work in today's environment from a lot of different reasons. So here you are, going against the grain of corporate farming, the big ag companies and all that stuff. Tell us a little bit about your background, your education, where you came from, and just kind of walk us through to that day when you said, something, I think I'm going to grow vegetables.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it going against the grain because I was in California this weekend at this summit out at Stanford, and somebody was asking, like, so for all the things you chose food, which is probably one of the hardest right now to go against.
The hardest.
Because everything is against you.
Yes.
And I'll kind of touch on why. But so growing up, I was always interested in nutrition. My mom has severe Crohn's disease. We grew up in a family that my grandparents lived on a farm in Iowa. My grandma had a very large garden. So we kind of knew how to cook. In high school, I ended up having these like sports-induced seizures. We didn't really know what they were from, but most likely due to inflammation where my body wasn't absorbing enough nutrients for me to get through the high-level activity that I was doing. So I ended up playing football in college, so that kind of at the D1 level, so that kind of gives the scale of the level I was playing at.
You're working.
Right. So ended up having these. We got it induced in Mayo. They couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was out at University of Southern California at a baseball camp my junior year of high school, and I met with a nutritionist there, Robert Yang, who was like, you should try going gluten-free. This was 15 years ago now.
Okay. Nobody knew what gluten was.
Nobody knew what gluten was.
Barely.
Yeah.
Right. And so prior to that, like I had pre-diabetic symptoms, like always thirsty, just inflammation everywhere. And I mean, I was still performing at a high level, but it wasn't, I just felt kind of off. And then with these sports-induced seizures, it was like, well, something's really going on. Ended up,
Question?
Yep.
When did you realize that because you said you felt off? Like what age did you, like you felt great and then all of a sudden I feel off?
I think it was more just a gradual of,
Okay.
I felt very much, I just felt like I couldn't, I don't know, I did have brain fog looking back at it. There were things that I was just kind of, it's hard to say because I was still performing at a very elite level,
Okay.
but
you felt like you could do more.
Right, I felt like I could do more. I was just sluggish, slow, very slow to recover. That was really the big
there's
thing.
the key.
Okay.
And ended up going gluten-free, and all of those symptoms went away.
Oh.
It took about 2 months, but it really was that dramatic. And looking back on it, we grew up in a system, especially at that age, where carb loading was a big thing. Like you should carb load all the time. And I mean, I was playing baseball and football, and I mean, yes, we get into this point where we might use our glucose reserves, but really not a lot. And so,
did you gain weight then, or
no? I mean, I was
because you were burning
exercising
calories
all the time. But what you could tell is that was kind of a very backwards thinking to now what we're seeing with the literature today, which is kind of a side note. But my diet, even though it was quote unquote healthy in the American way, it was very much heavy on carbohydrates, heavy on meat, heavy on potatoes. We did eat summer vegetables, but it's not like it was a very big, I wouldn't say it was a priority. And then going gluten-free, it changed everything because there weren't a lot of gluten-free products out there.
There weren't back then.
And like gluten-free pizza, you might as well just be eating cardboard.
Right.
I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah.
And so really had to learn how to cook. And that was one of the, honestly, the best things that happened because I started to have appreciation for cooking. My mom and I started looking at food differently and saying, okay, let's start to experiment with other different types of food. The other thing that we know is that gluten in the U.S. is very different than gluten in Europe.
Yes, it is, because everybody goes to Europe and they're like, I can have the pizza, I can have the
pasta.
Yeah, and so like being gluten, it's a whole thing. But
the whole show on that.
Yeah, you could talk about that forever. So that was kind of my first wake up call to like, wow, this stuff matters. When I was in college, I did an internship with the State Department in France, and went over there during the summer between my sophomore and junior year. I was playing college football. I was training very heavily. I went over at 215 pounds, came back at 195 pounds.
Wow. Lost
20 pounds, and I was eating probably twice as much over there than I was in the U.S., and I felt amazing. I mean, I would just devour food, and you wouldn't feel bloated. You wouldn't feel tired afterwards. I mean, it was just so different. And one of the things that I will never forget is Secretary Tom Vilsack of the Department of Agriculture for the U.S. was over there. We were helping to support a conference between him and then the head of the French Department of Agriculture. And one of the big things that, for those of you that know agriculture, is that the U.S. is constantly trying to push GMOs out to the rest of the world.
Right.
So you have these large corporations in the United States that have developed these GMO crops that are pushing that out.
Monsanto and others.
Right, Monsanto, Bayer, to try to get the rest of the world to adopt them. Well, the head of the Department of Agriculture in France was like, we are never going to allow that to happen under my control, because then you run into the situation of what's happening in the United States, which is seed, fertilizer, equipment, everything is controlled by corporations, which for a lot of them, the main interest there is profit. And you're operating in an environment with food, which is a very low margin crop, trying to create high margins off of that when it's something we should be eating every day.
Right.
And so that stuck with me, along with my actual experience over in France. But never did anything about it then. Came back to the States, got super into international development, policy, all of that. Spent some time in DC afterwards and started to get more into environmental sustainability from plastic waste, pollution, all of that. And then moved over to Tanzania and was there for a year.
Wow.
What the, so what, you got PhD in 6 different things or what?
Nope. So
why Tanzania?
So I mean, I was doing consulting work in DC, and I just felt like it wasn't for me. I wanted something a little bit more, and I wanted to know if I wanted to go into international development. And this was an opportunity that I could take to really figure that path out. So I was doing supply chain procurement over in Tanzania for an organization called the International Rescue Committee. So we were supporting about 400,000 refugees from Burundi and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So I was there for a year, and I mean, when you're able to take a step away from the U.S. culture and specifically Western culture, you really start to appreciate so much more of the little things and just how complex and overcomplicated we make things in the U.S.
Systems.
Yes. And one of the big things that you could see in Tanzania was, well, first their chicken market, it was a 85% live chicken market. So the chicken that you ate was just slaughtered like 2 hours before.
And I bet you it was really good.
Very good. It was very good. The meat over there was phenomenal. We had goat, I mean, all different types, and it was really good. But I mean, what you'd see with the system is you would have trucks come in from some of the larger agricultural producing regions into the major cities that night. So the food you were getting was typically
just got
a day,
fresh.
2 days old, if that.
Fresh.
There were fruit stands all around, and so the access to like fresh stuff, it was the same way in Europe. You could go to a stand and it was harvested that day. Whereas in the U.S., it's pretty much impossible to find that. It actually is impossible to find that, except on specific farmers market days. So then the other part was our Tanzanian colleagues would laugh at our food system because, I mean, they're like, you guys just grow with chemicals and fatten up your chickens. Like, that's all you do.
Right. Fat and sick.
Yes. And so it was like,
We're moving.
there's a lot that you realize that you like about the West, but I mean, it was a phenomenal experience in so many different ways. But kind of through that whole time, I was dealing with a lot of chronic nerve pain down my legs.
Interesting. Hold that thought.
Chronic nerve pain.
So we got to go out the break. We'll come back right after these messages. I'm
going to Matt's.
or go to Matt's. Okay. So Matt Arends, when we went out to break, you were saying about nerve pain going down your leg when you're in Tanzania.
Yes.
Pick it up from there.
So it actually started kind of at the tail end of my time in DC, to the point where I couldn't sit longer than 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
I was miserable. It was a burning pain down both legs. Kind of stopped at the knee. But the problem is it was impacting my ability to think, function in social environments.
Sure.
I mean, it's similar to everyone dealing
background
with chronic pain.
noise all the time.
Right. And so, I mean, that I dealt with that all through Tanzania. And when I moved back home to LA, I worked there for a few months and was just at such a low point in my life. Not only was I dealing with the pain, I was also dealing with culture shock of coming back from Tanzania, moving straight to LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow.
That wasn't easy. And so emotionally, I was just a wreck. Emotionally and mentally, I was a wreck. And so I moved home to Minnesota in December of 2019 and spent about 2.5 months figuring out what we were going to do about the pain, because it was horrible. And I mean, I was fortunate that my family was here. I was fortunate that I had a medical network here because of my time growing up in Minnesota here. So I was fortunate with that. Ended up having double hip surgery, March 4th, 2020. Yep. March 4th, 2020. So I had very poor hip structure and played all through college with this. Never had actual hip pain. It was only the radiating nerve pain.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up shaving down a ton of bone, repairing the labrums, and then it was a 9-month recovery. So during the recovery process, obviously COVID hits. So I'm sitting at home with this passive hip motion machine, and everything is unfolding. And so I had a lot of time to think and just do random things. And my interest in environmental sustainability really kind of came to its highest point when I was in Tanzania, because you could look at what was happening when Western companies were coming over to developing countries and seeing the amount of pollution, trash, waste, and honestly destruction that was going on by the practices that we were living by in the United States. So, like, if you were to walk around Nairobi in 2018, there's a very good chance that you'd be hit in the face by a flying black plastic bag. Kenya was also one of the first countries in the world to then ban plastic bag use, because that was such a huge problem. Prior to that, about 10, 15 years ago, they were using more natural solutions. Like, you would have stuff wrapped in banana leaves or things like that would all decompose. Well, you have corporations then come over and, here's the beauty of plastic. It's so convenient. Well, there's no waste management system in a lot of these countries. And the ones that do exist are either throwing it into the river or burning it. So you have extreme pollution going on. Like, if you've ever been to a developing country, like, it's right there. It's in your face all the time. Whereas in the U.S., it's not.
But
we hide it well.
But it is.
Right. Well, we hide it very well.
Ooh, but it is.
And then you start to look at the pollution aspect of it, and then the human health aspect. So the interesting part in Tanzania that you could start to see unfolding was that those that were starting to transition to more office-based work, who had higher incomes, they also had more money to access the grocery stores, which were filled with processed food from the developed world that were being imported in. So you could see night and day Tanzanians that were working office jobs coming and starting to become more of like that obese structure that we're seeing in the U.S. Whereas those Tanzanians that weren't like that,
obese structure,
they were right. They were. I mean, that's what it's very night and day. And then those that weren't working in that, better physique, overall just healthier, and that, I think, to see that right then and there, it's like, holy cow.
Wants me to do a cleanse. I feel like I want to do a cleanse again.
Yeah, and it was something that was like food impacts, it really hit me. It's like food impacts every aspect of our life, from the water quality to the air pollution to our own health, and then obviously to ecological and ecosystem health. So you look at the U.S. system, like when I was in kind of just doing rehab, well, 45% of produce is now imported into the United States, and roughly 55 to 65% of fruits are imported into the U.S. Predominantly, our food comes from California and the Southwest, whereas the University of Minnesota actually did this study and looked at what it would take to feed certain populations in Minnesota. And to feed all of the Northeast, which is like Duluth, it's about 500,000 people. It would take about 345,000 acres, which is about 300,000 acres less than if you did. So 345,000 growing seasonal type produce.
Seasonal produce.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whereas it would take about 600,000 acres to kind of grow the foods that we consume in the American SAD diet. So just kind of your bread, pasta, wheat products, things like that. So then you look at the Northwest Minnesota. Well, we've got 18 million acres that are being farmed as oats, wheat, corn, soy, all of that. 18 million acres that could be used for production for human consumption at a much smaller scale.
So what's that produce going then? Feed animals? Or?
Feed animals, ethanol, and then the wheat products that we consume
Cereal.
from General Mills, right?
North Dakota, the soybeans.
Yeah.
Yes. And
that's where I'm from.
so when you look at it and you go, why in the Midwest are we relying on so much importation from other countries? Yep.
What about like avocados and oranges and all those types of things that they, it just doesn't grow here?
No, I mean, we don't need them.
I know, but they taste good.
They do taste good.
I like my
but
avocados.
I'll touch on that in a little bit.
Okay.
So like you look at it and it's like, why are we importing so much of this food when we can grow it here in Minnesota?
Because the world's taking over.
The world is taking over. So you look at it and you start to say, okay, these Minnesota farmers, these small scale farmers, part of the problem is in Minnesota we do have a short growing season.
Right.
But one of the benefits that I will say of industrial agriculture is the technology that has come along with it and the science that we've learned and all of that. So there is some benefit to it. But what people don't realize is that we can grow food year round in Minnesota, even when it's negative 20 degrees
It's called
outside.
a greenhouse.
Yes, it's called either an unheated greenhouse, a heated greenhouse, or a geothermal greenhouse. So when I was going through rehab, I got super into these geothermal greenhouses. So we prototyped 4 of them. A few of my high school buddies and I prototyped 4 of them.
Like going to build a deck.
Yes.
Yeah, buddies are getting together to grow.
Exactly. And it was actually, I mean, it's a super easy system because you go below 4 feet, you lay in perforated piping, you use a small fan, and you can heat a greenhouse as long as you insulate some of the walls that aren't getting the sun exposure through the winter. And you can
To what temperature?
I mean, you could heat it from 35 all the way really up to 55.
Okay, what can I grow in that?
So in an unheated greenhouse in the wintertime, you're looking at growing things like spinach, claytonia, this tatsoi spinach, and carrots is what you can grow if you get them to a mature state early enough. Whereas if you get it where you can keep it above freezing, you've now opened that possibility to Swiss chard, kale, beets, radishes, all different sorts of lettuce. You essentially grow from being able to grow 4 or 5 crops to 15, 16 types of crops.
Okay, so what I like out of what you just said, lettuce.
Minnesotans love their
Basil?
lettuce. You wouldn't be able to grow basil.
You wouldn't?
No. It gets too cold for basil. The soil
In the
temperature.
heated?
Yep. You would have to keep it at like 65. Otherwise basil starts to
Okay.
Overnight.
go down.
Okay.
So you do have slowed growth in the wintertime because you have less sunlight. But we were looking at that, and so we developed a few geothermal greenhouses, and on one of the properties, that's how my farming career began. In Prior Lake, we ended up building one, and the property owners were like, yeah, let's kind of trial this farm. So we did it for the first year last fall. I had never had a background in farming, never knew what I was doing. The only time I really grew anything was when my mom and I started a little vegetable garden right after my surgery. And that was how I got into it and loved it, because I could watch these things grow. It was very therapeutic to me. So that farm, we ended up, they didn't want to go forward with the second year, so moved it to now the permanent location where it's at in Prior Lake at this greenhouse and nursery called Queen Bees.
Queen bees.
Yep. And so
Welcome back to the program. Thanks for staying with us. This is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com. We're here speaking with Matt Arends about sustainability in farming and how he made his journey in here. We're going to have him come back for another show, because we're
not
going to blow
done
through this segment, and I got a whole list of things I wanted to talk about. So when we went out to break, we were talking about you had done some experimenting with geothermal greenhouses and year-round growing. You moved that facility now and partnered up with Queen Bees, and that is now there. So what does that look like? What kind of temperatures that you can maintain year-round, and what kind of crops are you growing on a year-round basis there?
Yeah, so unfortunately the geothermal greenhouses are still at the other plots.
Okay.
You can't really, that was one of the design flaws, is you can't really pick them up and just move them.
Okay.
So some of it in my innovator mind is thinking, well, how can we do that? We haven't come up with a solution yet, but...
What about drilling wells like they do for heating homes? I mean, my brother Les has his when he lived in Winona, his house he was selling energy back to the utilities because he had a well.
Yep.
A heat pump source.
Yeah, so
that
heat pump is actually something that I've been looking into, of like, is that a possibility that you could use on a large scale? And this is kind of why, this is one of the reasons why this is, the geothermal systems we had was a design flaw, is because if you look at the average age of a farmer, it's like 62 now.
Yeah.
So you have more farmers exiting, which means more farmland is up for sale, and a lot of us younger farmers, we can't afford to buy property.
Well, there aren't that many of you.
There aren't that many of us, number one, and number two, finding land that actually has fertile soil that hasn't been completely destroyed is another part. The other part is, because of development, it's pushed farmland even farther out from population centers that are willing to actually eat healthy, where rural populations...
Then you got transportation issues, distribution problems.
So then you run into this whole issue of, well, how do you actually sell your product that at a way that you can support your living, right? And so for a lot of them, they have families. A lot of young farmers either have families or are coming from situations not from money. And so you're trying to figure out, well, how do we fit all of this together, right? And so that was one of the design flaws with these geothermal greenhouses, is you can really only sell those to people that have an established property that are going to be there for a while.
Right.
Because you just can't move it. So like at Spring Lake Farm, we don't have a geothermal greenhouse, but I've got one unheated greenhouse, and then we'll be adding another one this fall. And I mean, we can grow, like I started stuff March 1st in there, and this winter I'll grow through the whole winter, hopefully, depending on how things go.
And then you just sell it to...
Yep. So we sell all direct to consumer. We do the Prior Lake Farmers Market. We have our farm stand and an online store at the farm that people can order ahead online, and then they pick up Tuesday through Thursday. And then I do also work with the Prior Lake School District. So we have some product in there, and then I do education seminars with the Prior Lake School District to kind of help with that, and then I do education, holistic health classes out at the farm.
Talk to me a little bit about then your seed and when you grow things. You know, so much of the seed now is genetically altered, and
right.
So where does your seed come from, and what are the organic practices that you employ, and and how many hours a week you put into it?
Yeah, so the seed question is a very good one, because I think we've been confused with the terminology that's gone on with the seed world, being like, what is a GMO? So genetically modified organism, I mean, a lot of the seeds that were actually, I would say 100% of the seeds that we're eating, or seeds that are producing plants that we're eating today, are some form of genetically modified.
Right.
Like humans have been doing this over the course of our
Crossbreeding
lifespan.
and all that.
Right.
Yep.
Because we're trying to prevent certain diseases. Some cultivars have better diseases than others. Where the GMO starts to become an issue is with systemic pesticide and herbicides. So what that means is that the seed actually is grown with the insecticide and pesticide in it.
Okay.
So when pests start to bite into that plant, they die.
Okay.
So that whole thing about washing your produce and stuff, it really doesn't matter because it's absorbed into the plant.
Oh, okay. Good, because I never do.
Yeah. Well,
Sheila
I mean,
does, but I don't.
if you're eating organic, you're most likely fine. But like they're spraying broad spectrum pesticides, systemic pesticides, and so the seeds that they're coming up with have to withstand that pesticide. And so that's where GMOs start to become an issue.
And then the body says, that is like a foreign chemical.
Right.
I don't know how to process that. Hence why now we have so many
Inflammation.
all the
Right.
issues. All
Nervous
of the
system
issues.
disorders,
Right.
especially
all
from a
the
young age
issues.
for kids.
You name it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what you're seeing within that seed space. And that's where large corporate agriculture kind of starts to take over. Like they did a study on a family. They were tracking a family to see, okay, what were the levels
Who's they?
I can't remember who did the study, but
Okay.
I can figure it out.
Okay.
So what they looked at was the level of glyphosate, which is Roundup,
Ouch.
in the body pre and post switching to an organic diet. So what they found is that within 6 days, the levels of glyphosate in the bodies of each family member decreased by 70%.
Oh, that's good news.
It's very good news, but that just tells you
How bad it is.
how bad it is. Like
Yeah.
you are eating chemicals every
Yeah,
day.
absolutely.
And
I just have I have a short video of a gal that knows her son's triggers, and she went into a scented store, and she's in there for 15 minutes, and the way that kid was before he went in, nice, calm, whatever, and then the 15 minutes after being in there, and how irate and how insane, and she couldn't keep him down and calm. I mean, it's so hard for people to believe that these chemicals can do this much damage,
Right.
but they can. And that's where, our passion is,
Right.
And you're teaching, right? I'm assuming you're teaching on those chemicals and what they do to the body and so forth,
Okay,
right?
let me ask you this. So you have these genetically hybrid seeds.
Yep.
All right. So they've been bred in for, like you say, to be resistant to this and resistant to that. So now that's the only kind of seed you can get.
I mean, that's more that your large scale industrial. So where it starts to become for like us, like there's a lot of seed companies out there that are certified organic.
Okay.
That are still working with more your heirloom types.
Okay.
So those that are more than 50 years old and the seed hasn't been modified, or that have done extensive research about how do we cross pollinate to create stronger plants for organic growers. So that, I mean, there's Johnny Seeds. I get my seeds from like 10 different places all around the country. And that's kind of where you start to see the small scale movement going. The demand for seed at this scale is insane right now. Like I have to pre-order my seeds for next year in like just October, November. Because of the number of small scale growers that have cropped up that are now doing this market garden small scale style of growing.
Chickens in the backyard, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Spring Lake Park Farm is the 952-356-4454.
Yep.
And Spring Lake Farms MN at Gmail.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we got that in there.
Right. Website?
And then website?
Yep. Our website is springlakefarmstore.com.
And anybody could hire you to do any kind of speaking, or you've got a holistic health 6-week reset. What's that?
Yeah, so that is part of my background too is I do nutrition coaching, and I also do breath coaching. So
Breath.
around performance coaching for athletes, but also stress management and kind of metabolic reset. So there's a lot of ways that we can do it that are typically not in the form of meditation or yoga, but actually advanced breath techniques that kind of help you operate between a sympathetic and a parasympathetic state. And so the whole 6-week program is designed to, one, take you through the food journey from here's what's happening, here's what are the fad diets, what's going on, how can you navigate that, to how do we actually get your metabolic functioning back up to where it should be.
Right.
And I have a lot of journaling exercises and a toolkit that goes along with the whole 6-week program that then helps you develop, along with me, that path for you to take.
And who would you recommend that program to?
Anybody who's struggling with inflammation, chronic disease, autoimmune disorders, pain generally, bloating, brain fog, all of that. This is going to be a huge reset. And it's not going to be pushing a specific thing on you. It's really helping educate you to give you the knowledge and the toolkit to apply. So
People don't know they have inflammation.
Oh yeah, everyone does.
They do, but they don't
Recognize it.
Yeah, they don't recognize it. It's not even a thing that they think they have.
Right.
And if they could just get that if they could make that 25%
Yep.
better, just think about how better you'd feel. Because I tell people all the time, if I helped you feel 25% better, would that be worth it to you?
Right.
I think maybe it would be.
For most people it is.
Right.
And it's,
So you go through that program and they feel what, 25, 50, 75, like how much better could they feel going through a program like that?
we've had like one woman that went through it, her micronutrient count just skyrocketed with her panels. And so you're saying 25, probably 50% I could get you, because it's really going to reset. And once you eliminate stuff, it takes 3 weeks, and you start to notice massive change.
Matt Arends, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Arends.
We got to have him back.
Would you? You come back?
Yeah.
We have so many topics that we didn't even touch on. This is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
But when he calls me sugar, I love that man with all my might. Sugar in the morning, sugar in the afternoon. Sugar after dinner, sugar in every room. He says I'm sweet as I can be. When he calls me that name, it does things to me. I tell him, honey, you can call